Detective Michael Clark hated Mondays, especially the damp fall Mondays that began with a call to a murder scene. A light rain drummed monotonously against the windshield of his squad car as he drove into the upscale neighborhood of Oakwood Hills. Here, amidst the manicured lawns and multi-million-dollar homes, something had happened that was out of the picture of the perfect life. 42 Maple Street, he muttered to himself, checking the address on the navigator. Harris, Elizabeth. As he pulled up to the two-story Victorian-style house, Clark noticed the familiar bustle of police cars with flashing lights, yellow tape blocking off the crime scene, and a few neighbors gathered nearby to watch the drama unfold. As he parked, he pulled a pack of mints out of the glove compartment, an old habit before examining a body. A young Officer Rodriguez, whose pallor betrayed the newcomer's pallor, was already rushing toward him. "Detective Clark," Rodriguez nodded. Female, 56 years old, found dead in the living room. Preliminary blunt force trauma to the head. Daughter found the body at about 8:30 this morning. "Is the daughter still here?" "Yes, sir. She's in the kitchen with the groom. Patrolman Johnson is with them." Clark nodded and, donning booties and gloves, crossed the neatly trimmed lawn. Inside the house, he was met by medical examiner Lauren Chen, who was already working on the body. "Good morning, Michael," she said, not taking her eyes off her measurements. Although for some, it wasn't a good morning at all. Elizabeth Harris lay on the living room floor, half hidden by an overturned coffee table. A pool of blood spread beneath her head, soaking into the light-colored carpet. Shards of a broken vase were visible next to her body, and fresh flowers were scattered around the room. "Time of death?" Clark asked, looking around the room. "Tentatively between 22 and 24 hours last night. Rigor mortis in the middle stages. Cause of death is obvious. A severe blow to the back of the head, possibly by this vase." Lauren pointed to a large blood-stained shard. "There are signs of defensive wounds on her arms, so she was trying to fight back." Clark nodded as he continued to survey the crime scene. The living room looked like there had been a struggle. Overturned chairs, broken dishes on the coffee table, a knocked-down painting on the wall. "Anything missing? Valuables? Money?" the detective asked. "The daughter says it doesn't look like anything was stolen. Jewelry, electronics, cash, everything's still there. It doesn't look like a robbery," Rodriguez replied. Clark frowned thoughtfully. If not a robbery, then what? A domestic dispute? Or something more personal? Two people were waiting for him in the kitchen. A young woman with disheveled dark hair and eyes red from crying, and a man with a tired, haggard face. The detective introduced himself, and after expressing the standard condolences, began his questioning. "Miss Harris, I understand how difficult this is for you, but I need to ask you a few questions. Did you find your mother's body this morning?" Sophia Harris nodded, her hands shaking as she clutched the paper cup of coffee. "Yes. We were supposed to meet for breakfast. My mom wasn't answering her phone, so I decided to stop by. I have a key. Her voice shook. "I found it there on the floor." "When was the last time you spoke to your mother?" "Yesterday afternoon, around 16. We were discussing the upcoming wedding. She was fine. She was in a good mood. David Mitchell, Sophia's fiancé, was sitting next to her, but it was as if he wasn't there. His gaze wandered around the room, never settling on anything in particular. Clark noticed that he was pale, dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Mitchell," the detective addressed him, "where were you last night between 22 and 24 hours?" The question made David wince. I was at home, alone, working on a project." "Can anyone confirm that?" "No. Sophia was with her friends. Girls' night before the wedding." His voice sounded lifeless. Clark made a note in his notebook. Something about David's behavior alarmed him, not the typical reaction of a future son-in-law to the death of his mother-in-law. "Dr. Harris was a doctor, right? What area did she specialize in?" "Infectious diseases," Sophia answered. "She worked at St. Joseph's Memorial Hospital in the infectious diseases department. She had a private practice, but the last few years she focused on research and working with patients at the hospital." "Did your mother have any enemies? Someone she had conflicts with?" Sophia shook her head. "No, everyone loved her. She saved so many lives." Her voice trailed off into sobs again. What about her personal life? Was she seeing anyone? "Not since her father died 6 years ago, no one serious. She's been completely devoted to her work. Clark noticed David nervously rubbing the sleeve of his shirt, exposing the edge of the Band-Aid on the bend of his elbow. A mark from a recent blood draw or injection. "Mr. Mitchell, are you all right? You don't look well." David looked up, fear in his eyes. "Yeah, just, stress. Work. Getting ready for the wedding. And now this," he stammered. "I'm fine." "Have you had any recent tests?" Clark asked, pointing to the needle mark. David instinctively covered his hand. Just a regular physical. Something about that answer didn't ring true, but Clark decided not to push it just yet. He asked a few more questions, and after thanking the couple, returned to the scene. Officer Rodriguez met him at the entrance to the living room. "Detective, forensics found something interesting. Traces of blood on the stairs leading up to the second floor. Looks like someone went upstairs after the murder." Clark followed Rodriguez to the second floor. Droplets of blood led to the master bedroom, a spacious room with a large bed and antique furniture. At first glance, there was nothing to indicate clutter or searching. "What was the killer looking for?" Clark muttered, looking around the room. The desk was neat, with stacks of medical journals and a laptop computer resting on it. Clark put on a new pair of gloves and opened the laptop. To his surprise, it wasn't password protected. "That's odd for a doctor," he remarked. "They're usually paranoid about data privacy." Nothing suspicious in his email except a few recently deleted emails. On the calendar, work appointments, patient appointments, a reminder to see his daughter this morning. "Rodriguez, get a warrant for the victim's email and phone records, and check the security cameras in the neighborhood." Back downstairs, Clark noticed pictures in the hallway. Family portraits. Elizabeth, her late husband, Sophia at various ages. A happy family. Lauren had finished her preliminary examination of the body and was preparing for transportation. "Michael, take a look at this." She pointed to the victim's hand. "There's traces of skin under the fingernails. She put up a desperate fight, probably scratched her attacker. We'll take DNA samples." Clark nodded. "Anything else of note?" "Yeah, as a matter of fact. When we turned the body over, I noticed puncture marks on the arm. Fresh, professionally done, like she was injecting herself regularly, given her profession." "Could she be being treated for something?" Clark suggested. "It's possible. We'll know after the autopsy." After the body was taken away, Clark walked around the house one more time. In the first-floor study, he found a locked desk drawer. With the help of forensics, it was opened, and inside was a folder of medical records. "Personal therapy," Clark read the inscription on the folder. Opening it, he froze. Lauren hadn't been mistaken. Dr. Harris was indeed in therapy. The documents confirmed that Elizabeth Harris was HIV positive and had been on antiretroviral therapy for the past 3 years. It was information that she seemed to have carefully concealed, even from her daughter. Back at the station, Clark began to organize the data. On a whiteboard, he posted photos of the crime scene and the key players. He dialed the number of the clinic where Elizabeth worked. After a brief conversation with the receptionist, he was connected to the head doctor, Dr. Roberts. "Detective Clark? What a terrible thing to happen to Elizabeth. We're all in shock. What can I do to help?" "Dr. Roberts, were you aware of Dr. Harris's medical condition?" There was a pause. "You mean her HIV status?" "Yes, I was aware. She contracted it about 3 years ago in an accident. A needle prick during a procedure. Such risks exist in our profession." "Did she continue to practice?" "Of course she did. HIV is not an impediment to practicing medicine if you follow safety protocols, which Elizabeth did rigorously. What's more, she moved on to work specifically with HIV-positive patients using her experience." "Who else knew about her condition?" "Just me and the medical board. Elizabeth was a very private person. As far as I know, she hadn't even told her daughter for fear of her reaction." Clark thanked the head doctor and wondered, why did David have injection marks? And why did he look so unwell? Coincidence or a connection? He decided to check David Mitchell's medical insurance and made the appropriate request. An hour later, he received a reply confirming his suspicions. David had recently started antiretroviral therapy, diagnosed with HIV infection 3 months ago. A coincidence? Clark didn't believe in coincidences. He looked at the picture of the happy couple, Sophia and David. They were to have their wedding in 2 weeks. Had Sophia known about her fiancé's diagnosis? Could Elizabeth have found out and tried to intervene, leading to conflict? The phone rang. Rodriguez reported that forensics had found fingerprints on the vase shards. They belonged to the victim and another person, as yet unidentified. Also, Detective, I checked Dr. Harris's cell phone records. There's a lot of calls to David Mitchell's cell phone over the last month, some lasting over an hour. The last one was 2 days before the murder. Clark tapped his pen on the desk thoughtfully. The picture was beginning to take shape, but something still eluded his attention. He remembered David's nervousness, the strange detachment, signs of guilt or fear. He needed to talk to Sophia's fiancé again, but alone. But first, he wanted to know more about Elizabeth Harris herself. The victim's contact list included Rachel Warren, labeled best friend. Clark decided to start with her. Maybe the friend knew about the secrets Elizabeth was keeping from her daughter. The time passed quickly, and when Clark looked at his watch, it was well past noon. He took another look at the crime scene photos. Something told him that the killer was no random person. There was too much personal in this crime, too much broken glass, too many broken lives. Rachel Warren lived in a small townhouse near the park. The 54-year-old woman with short graying hair met Clark in the bright living room, where everything seemed to have its precisely defined place. Her eyes were red with tears. "I still can't believe it," she said, pouring tea into dainty china cups. "Elizabeth was the closest person to me. We'd been friends since college." Clark accepted the cup cautiously. "Miss Warren, I understand how difficult this is for you, but I need your help. Were you aware of Dr. Harris's medical condition?" Rachel froze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "About her HIV status?" "Yes. She told me almost immediately after her diagnosis. It had been a huge blow to her, though she'd been resilient outwardly." "Did she tell you how she got infected?" Elizabeth said it happened at work, an accidental needle prick during a procedure. Rachel set the cup down. "But, I'm not sure that's true." Clark stepped forward. "What makes you doubt it?" You see, Elizabeth was exceptionally careful about anything involving medical procedures. In 30 years on the job, she'd never had a single incident, and around that time, Rachel hesitated. She was having an affair. An affair? With whom? She wouldn't give a name. All she said was that he wasn't the right man, that it was impossible. But I noticed a change in her, like she was younger, more energetic. And then it all came to an abrupt halt, and soon she announced her diagnosis. Clark made a note in his notebook. "When exactly did this happen?" "About 3 years ago." "And have you noticed anything unusual in her behavior lately?" Rachel thought for a moment. "Yeah, I guess so. About a month ago, we met for lunch at the Lavender Cafe, and she was strangely distracted. And then I saw her talking to some man in the parking lot. They looked, tense." "Can you describe this man?" "Tall, dark hair, well-dressed. I couldn't see his face from a distance. Could this man have been David Mitchell, her daughter's fiancé?" Rachel shrugged. "It could have been. I'd only seen David in the pictures Elizabeth had shown me." Had she said anything about her attitude toward her daughter's upcoming wedding? On the surface, she seemed very supportive. But Rachel paused. For the last couple of weeks, she had seemed worried. When I asked, she said she was worried about Sophia's future. I figured it was just the usual motherly fears. "What about Sophia? How was their relationship?" "They were close, although Elizabeth kept a certain distance from her daughter. She didn't want Sophia to know about her HIV status. She was afraid of reactions, judgment, pity. Elizabeth had always been a very proud person." Clark asked a few more questions, and after thanking Rachel, walked out feeling that he had gotten important pieces of the big picture. But there was something else, something that eluded his grasp. In the car, the phone rang. It was Rodriguez. "Detective, we have the DNA results from under the victim's fingernails. It doesn't match anyone in the database, but..." He hesitated. "Based on the markers, it could be a relative." "A relative?" Clark interjected. "Dr. Harris has no living relatives other than her daughter. We could request DNA samples from the daughter for comparison," Rodriguez suggested. "Let's take our time for now. Just keep working." Clark thought for a moment. Suppose there really was something between Elizabeth and David. Could she have infected him with HIV? Was he aware of her status? and what had been going on between them lately. He decided to talk to David once more, but this time in private. After calling him, Clark arranged to meet him at a coffee shop near David's office. When the detective arrived, David was already waiting for him at a table in the corner. He looked even worse than he had that morning, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for seeing me," Clark began. "I have some additional questions." David nodded nervously, avoiding a direct look. "I want to help the investigation, but I'm not sure how." "How long have you known Dr. Harris?" "About a year, since Sophia and I got engaged." "And what was your relationship like?" Normal. The usual son-in-law and mother-in-law relationship." David sipped water from his glass, his hand shaking visibly. "Mr. Mitchell, I have information about phone conversations between you and Dr. Harris. Multiple calls, some lasting over an hour, often late at night." David turned even paler. "We were, discussing the wedding." "At 3 a.m, without the bride in attendance?" David was silent, his eyes roving the room. "Look," Clark's tone softened. "I know about your recent diagnosis. HIV infection, diagnosed 3 months ago. I also know that Dr. Harris was HIV positive. That's not a coincidence, is it?" David covered his face with his hands. "Does Sophia know?" he asked faintly. "About your diagnosis? Or about your relationship with her mother?" "About any of it." His voice shook. "Not yet, but she'll have to find out. It's better she hears the truth from you than from the police." David took a deep breath. "It's not what you think. Nothing has happened between Elizabeth and me in the last few months. Yes, we had a brief affair about 3 months ago. I didn't know about her status. She didn't tell me." "You were dating your fiancé's mother?" Clark didn't hide his surprise. "It was before Sophia and I were engaged. I met Elizabeth at a charity event. She was incredible. Smart, passionate, beautiful. We started dating. I didn't realize she was Sophia's mother until we happened to all meet together. Elizabeth pretended we didn't know each other." "And later, you started dating her daughter?" "No, it was the other way around. I had already been dating Sophia for a few weeks when I met Elizabeth at that event. I didn't know they were related. And when I found out, it was too late. Elizabeth and I were already involved. She insisted that we should end the relationship, and I agreed. But it was already..." He stammered. "It was too late." Clark finished for him. "She had infected you." David nodded. "When I got the diagnosis, I was in shock. I called Elizabeth, and she confessed. Said she didn't know about her status when we were together. But then..." He shook his head. "You didn't believe her?" "Then I found the paperwork in her office. She knew about her diagnosis long before we met. She lied to me." "And you got angry?" "Of course I was angry." There was bitterness in David's voice. "She ruined my life. And now I had to tell Sophia that I was HIV positive and that her own mother had infected me. What do you think that would have done to her?" "So you decided not to tell?" "I was trying to find the right moment. We stopped being intimate with Sophia. I said I wanted to wait until after the wedding, and actually waited for the retest results, hoping the first one was a mistake. But it wasn't." He looked at Clark with desperation in his eyes. "I didn't kill Elizabeth, I swear. I was angry, yes, but I'm not capable of murder." Clark scrutinized David's face. He looked sincere, but many murderers are good at lying. "Where were you the night of the murder?" "I already told you, at home, alone." "No witnesses?" "I ordered food at about 2:51 p.m. I can show you the confirmation on the attachment. The delivery guy saw me, and the neighbor, Mrs. Coleman, saw me take the order too, but after that, no one saw me." Clark made a note to check for alibis. "David, do you know who might have had a motive to kill Dr. Harris?" David shook his head. "Everyone loved her. She saved lives. I don't know who..." Suddenly, he stopped talking as if remembering something. "What?" Clark asked. "The last time we talked to Elizabeth, she seemed troubled, said she was afraid the truth would come out, that Sophia suspected something. But I didn't think much of it. Sophia didn't know anything, I'm sure." Clark frowned. What if Elizabeth was right? What if Sophia did suspect something? A daughter finding out about her mother and fiancé's betrayal. That's a powerful motive. When Clark returned to the station, the autopsy report was on his desk. Lauren Chen confirmed that the cause of death was a head injury from a heavy object. The vase shards matched the shape of the wound. Death was instantaneous. No other injuries were found on Elizabeth Harris's body other than defensive wounds on her arms. In addition, tests confirmed that Elizabeth was indeed HIV positive and had been taking antiretroviral drugs for several years. His musings were interrupted by a phone call. Sophia Harris wanted to talk urgently. "Detective Clark, there's something I need to show you." Sophia's voice sounded strangely calm. "It's about David." They agreed to meet at Elizabeth's house in an hour. Clark arrived on time. Sophia opened the door immediately, as if she'd been waiting at the front door. Her eyes were dry, but reddened, as if she'd already cried all her tears. "Come in," she said, leading him into his mother's office. There was a cell phone on the desk. "This is David's cell phone. I took it while he was sleeping." She turned on the screen and opened the correspondence. "Look." Clark looked at the messages between David and the contacts saved as E.H. The most recent ones were dated about 2 weeks earlier. "We need to talk. Sophia deserves the truth," Elizabeth wrote. "No, it would ruin everything. Give me time," David replied. "There is no time. If you won't tell her, I will. It's my duty as a mother. Please don't do this. We'll find a way out. Meet me tomorrow at 8. "I don't understand what they're talking about," Sophia said, watching Clark's reaction. "What truth do I deserve to know? And why was my mother secretly dating my fiancé?" Clark chose his words carefully. "Miss Harris, do you have any guesses? At first I thought they were planning some kind of surprise wedding, but the tone of the messages, it's something serious." She looked him straight in the eye. Had David been with Mom the night before she died? He said he was working late. "We're checking the alibis of everyone connected to your mother," Clark replied evasively. "Sophia, have you noticed anything unusual in your mother's or David's behavior lately?" Sophia was silent for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "David has become distant, said he was overworked. We weren't physically close anymore. And Mom..." She hesitated. "Mom looked at me strangely sometimes, like she wanted to say something but couldn't make up her mind." Clark nodded, making a mental note. "Sophia, did you know that your mother was HIV positive?" Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. "What? No, that's impossible," she would have told me. "We have medical documents to prove it. She hid her status from many people, including you." "But how? When did she get infected?" "About 3 years ago. The official story is accidental needle sticking at work." "What's the unofficial version?" Sophia sounded wary. Clark was carefully weighing how much information to reveal. "We're exploring every possibility. Your mother could have had a man she was in a relationship with at the time." Sophia shook her head. "No, that's impossible. After my father died, my mother never brought anyone home. She devoted herself completely to her work and to me." "Sometimes people hide parts of their lives, even from those closest to them," Clark said softly. Sophia was silent for a long moment, then said softly, "Do you think David killed my mother?" "We don't have enough evidence to make that conclusion. We're checking all the leads." "I don't know what to think." Her voice shook. "If my mom really was HIV positive, if she and David..." Sophia didn't finish the sentence, her face contorted with a sudden realization. "Oh my God! What is it?" Clark became alarmed. "David's meds. I found them in the bathroom a few days ago. Googled the names. They're antiretrovirals, right? Is he HIV positive too?" Clark realized the question was rhetorical. Sophia had already put 2 and 2 together. "You need to talk to David," he said. "But first I need to finish my investigation." "They were together," Sophia whispered, as if talking to herself. "My mother and my fiancé, and she infected him. And now she's dead." There was something frightening in Sophia's gaze, a mixture of shock, anger, and realization. Clark watched her carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. "Sophia, where were you the night of your mother's murder?" "At a bachelorette party, with my girlfriends. There were 8 of us, and we were at the Blue Lotus bar until 2 in the morning. Then I went to my friend Jennifer's house, stayed the night. In the morning, I went to my mom's for breakfast, and, I found her." Can anyone confirm that you stayed at Jennifer's all night? Jennifer, of course. And her roommate saw me arrive. We ordered pizza after the bar. Delivery was around 2:30. Clark nodded, making a mental note to check that alibi. Thanks for the information, Sophia. Don't leave town anytime soon. Be careful with David. When Clark left, he sensed that the investigation had taken a major turn. If David and Elizabeth really were lovers, if she knew about her HIV status and hid it from him by infecting him, he had a powerful motive for murder. But something told Clark that the story was more complicated than that. Sophia's reaction was far too controlled for someone who had just learned of such a betrayal. It was as if she already knew or suspected the truth. He called Rodriguez. Check Sophia Harris's alibi for the night of the murder, and find me everything you can about Jennifer. He hesitated, realizing he didn't know Sophia's friend's last name. Jennifer Morris, Rodriguez prompted. She's already listed in Miss Harris's interrogation report as the person she stayed with the night of the murder. That's good. And Rodriguez, request a warrant to access Sophia Harris's medical records. You think she's in on it too? I don't know, but we need to eliminate all possibilities. After hanging up the phone, Clark took another look at the case file. David claimed he found out he was HIV positive 3 months ago. Sophia had apparently just learned of David's diagnosis and the possible connection between him and her mother. But assuming Sophia knew before, if she discovered David's medication, suspected a connection between him and her mother, and confirmed her suspicions by reading their correspondence, a motive for killing a mother who betrayed her daughter with her fiancé and infected him with a deadly virus was more than enough. And yet, something didn't add up. If Sophia is the killer, why is she herself showing him the correspondence confirming the motive? Why draw attention to the relationship? Or is this a sophisticated strategy, pointing suspicion at David and staying on the sidelines? Clark rubbed his temples. The case was getting more and more complicated. But one thing was clear. The hidden connections between these 3 men had led to tragedy, and he had to untangle that tangle before someone else got hurt. Rain drummed on the roof of the police station as Clark laid out photos and documents on a large board. 3 days of investigation, and the picture was slowly taking shape. A dark story of love, betrayal, and sickness. So what do we have? Lieutenant Morrison asked, watching the detective work. Clark pointed to a photograph of Elizabeth Harris. Victim, Dr. Elizabeth Harris, 56 years old, HIV positive for the past 3 years, hid her status from her daughter and co-workers. He moved his finger to David's picture. David Mitchell, 28 years old, fiancé of the victim's daughter. Also HIV positive, diagnosed 3 months ago. And finally, he pointed to Sophia's photo, Sophia Harris, 25 years old, daughter of the victim, discovered the body. And where are we with the motive? Morrison inquired. We've confirmed through phone records and texts that there was communication between Elizabeth and David. David admitted that they had a brief affair around the time he contracted HIV. He claims he was unaware of her status and was furious when he found out, but denies murder. Alibi? Partial. He was home alone at the time of the murder, but there is a witness who saw him about an hour before the estimated time of death. A caterer. And the daughter? Claims she was at a hen party with her friends, then stayed the night with her friend Jennifer Morris. She has witnesses. But you don't believe her. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Clark sighed. There are inconsistencies. Sophia shows too little emotion for someone who's lost her mother, and she was very quick to focus on the possible connection between her mother and her fiancé, as if she already suspected it. DNA from under the victim's fingernails? Results are still mixed. It's not David, that's for sure, but the markers indicate a possible relationship to the victim. Sophia? Morrison raised an eyebrow. It's possible. We're waiting for a warrant for her DNA samples. The conversation was interrupted by a ringing phone. Clark answered and tensed, listening to the person on the line. Copy that. I'm on my way right away. He turned to the lieutenant. Sophia Harris just called at 911. She claims she found her mother's diary with evidence of a connection between Elizabeth and David, and she's hysterical. Elizabeth Harris's house looked ominous in the twilight. Police tape still fenced off the entrance, but Clark noticed the lights inside. Sophia was sitting in the living room, holding a tattered leather-bound notebook. I was looking for papers for the funeral home and I found this, she said, raising tear-red eyes. It's Mom's diary. There's horrible things in there. Clark carefully picked up the diary. It was filled with Elizabeth's neat handwriting. Quickly flipping through, he saw entries dated a few months earlier. I can't believe I let this happen. David. He looks so much like Robert when he was young. Same look, same passion. I know it's crazy, he's dating my daughter, but I can't resist the attraction. And later, today we met again. This is the last time, I swore to myself. Sophia must never find out. But every time I look at him next to her, I feel this horrible mixture of guilt and jealousy. And finally, an entry dated about 3 months ago, I made an unforgivable mistake. David tested positive. I infected him. How could I have been so irresponsible? He doesn't know I'm the source. He thinks he got infected from a casual hookup before Sophia. I can't tell him. It would ruin everything. I have to fix this situation somehow. She slept with my fiancé. Sophia's voice was full of pain. And then she infected him with HIV and hid it from both of us. Clark watched her carefully. Sophia, how did you feel when you read that? What did I feel? She laughed bitterly. Rage, disgust, betrayal. Mom had always been perfect for me. And David, I loved him. I was going to spend my life with him. And the whole time She didn't finish the sentence. When did you first suspect there was something between them? Sophia froze, then slowly looked up. A few weeks ago, David had become distant. I found his medication, Googled it. Then I saw messages on his phone, but I didn't want to believe it. I thought it was some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding. So what did you do? I didn't do anything. I waited. I hoped I was wrong. Did you confront your mother? Something flashed in Sophia's eyes. Fear? Guilt? But it quickly disappeared. No, I wasn't sure. And then it was too late. Clark nodded thoughtfully. Sophia, I need a sample of your DNA for exclusion. A simple procedure, just a swab of your mouth. Why? There was a note of wariness in her voice. There's DNA under your mother's fingernails. She fought back against her attacker, probably scratched him. If we rule you out, it'll help narrow it down. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. Do what you need to do. While the officer took a DNA sample from Sophia, Clark took another look at the crime scene. Something was bugging him, a small detail escaping his attention. In Elizabeth's office, his gaze fell on a family photo. Elizabeth, her late husband Robert, and little Sophia. A happy family, shattered first by death and now by betrayal and murder. He remembered the words from the diary. David. He looks so much like Robert when he was young. Was Elizabeth really looking to David to replace her late husband? When Clark returned to the living room, Sophia sat motionless, staring into the void. Detective, tell me the truth, she said quietly. Do you think David killed my mother? We don't have enough evidence against anyone yet, Clark replied cautiously. But David certainly had a motive. Yes, he did, Sophia echoed. 2 days later, the DNA results were ready. Clark was sitting in his office reviewing the report when the phone rang. It was David. Detective, we need to talk. His voice sounded strained. I remembered something important about the night of the murder. They met at the same cafe. David looked gaunt, his features sharpened by the stress of the last few days. Sophia knew, he began without preamble. Before the murder, she found my meds, asked me why I was taking them. I lied, said it was for a chronic infection, but she didn't believe me. I saw her checking my phone when she thought I was asleep. When was this? A few days before the murder. Sophia became, strange, distant. I thought she was just nervous about the wedding. Why didn't you tell me this before? I didn't want to involve her, and I was still hoping she didn't know the whole truth. But yesterday, he stopped talking. What happened yesterday? She came home and said she found Elizabeth's diary, said she knew everything, about our connection, about how I got infected. She was, too calm. It was scary. And then she asked me if I killed her mother. And what did you say? The truth. That I didn't. Then she cried and said, I knew you couldn't have, but it doesn't matter now. Clark frowned. What did she mean by that? I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about it. I'm afraid she might do something Irreversible. When Clark returned to the station, there was an envelope with the DNA results and the alibi check report waiting for him. He quickly reviewed the documents and felt the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. He dialed Sophia's number, but she didn't answer. Then he called Jennifer Morris, Sophia's best friend. "Miss Morris, this is Detective Clark. I'm looking for Sophia Harris. Do you know where she is right now?" "She's at my place," Jennifer answered after a pause. "She moved in yesterday. Said she couldn't stay in her apartment after everything that happened. I need to talk to her. It's urgent. She's asleep. She took sleeping pills. The last few days have been a nightmare for her. Please wake her up. It's about a murder investigation." After a long pause, Jennifer replied, "Okay, come over." Jennifer's apartment was in a modern apartment building on the outskirts of the city. Clark arrived with 2 patrolmen. Jennifer opened the door, a young woman with a wary look. "She's in the guest bedroom," Jennifer said. "I woke her up, but she's not in the best condition." Sophia was sitting on the edge of the bed, pale, with a faded look in her eyes. Seeing Clark, she smiled weakly. "You've got it all figured out, haven't you?" she asked quietly. Clark nodded. "Jennifer wasn't with you the night of the murder. She lied to give you an alibi." Sophia didn't deny it. Jenny had always been a good friend. Too good. "We checked the cameras on the road leading to your mother's house. Your car passed there at 23:30, the night of the murder." "I didn't think about the cameras." She shook her head. "It was stupid of me." "And the DNA under your mother's fingernails matched yours." Sophia raised her hand to her neck, where the pale scratches were still visible. She was trying to protect herself. It must be instinct. Clark sat down across from her. "Tell me what happened, Sophia." She took a deep breath. "I found out about David and his medication a few weeks ago. At the time, I didn't realize the connection to my mom yet. I thought he'd gotten infected somewhere before me, and I was afraid to tell." Her voice was lifeless, mechanical. "Then I saw the messages on his phone, from his mom, and it all started to come together. Their strange looks, the sudden calls, the unexplained absences." "So you decided to confront the mother?" "I didn't plan to. I just went to see her. I wanted to hear her explanation, her side of the story. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding, a mistake." Sophia clenched her hands into fists. But when I arrived, she understood immediately. She saw my face and realized I knew. "And what did she say?" "At first, she denied it. Then when I showed her the messages I copied from David's phone, she, broke down. Admitted everything. Said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. That David reminded her of my father." Contempt slipped into her voice. "She said she didn't know she was HIV positive when she was with him. That when she found out, it was too late." "Did you believe her?" "No. I asked how long she'd known about her diagnosis. She tried to avoid answering, but I insisted, and then she admitted that she knew long before she met David, knew and kept it from him." Sophia raised a blank stare to Clark. "My own mother, the woman who taught me honesty and responsibility, she slept with my fiancé and deliberately infected him with a deadly disease. And that's when you took the vase?" "I don't remember. It's all a blur. I remember her trying to hug me, telling me she loved me, that she'd do anything to make things right. And all I could see was her face, the face of the woman who had betrayed me in the worst way." Sophia closed her eyes. The next thing I knew, she was lying on the floor, blood all around, and a vase shard in my hand. "Did you realize what you were doing?" "Not at that moment. But afterward, yes. I realized that she was dead and that I had killed her." Sophia opened her eyes. "I went up to her bedroom, looking for the journal she mentioned. I wanted to find proof, corroboration, but I couldn't find any. So I wiped everything I could touch and left, and played surprised when the body was discovered the next morning." Sophia nodded. "I thought I could live with it, that I could forgive myself. After all, she deserved it, didn't she?" There was a pleading note in her voice. "She ruined my life, David's life. We were going to get married, have children." Clark looked at the broken young woman in front of him and felt only sadness. So many lives ruined by one rash act, one secret, one lie that had grown into a tragedy. "Sophia Harris, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Elizabeth Harris," he said in an official tone. signaling to the officers. "You have the right to remain silent." 6 months later, Clark sat in the courtroom, listening to the jury's verdict. Sophia had been found guilty of manslaughter with the mitigating circumstance of severe emotional distress. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. David was not present in the courtroom. The last Clark had heard of him, he had moved to another city, started a new life, as much as possible for someone with his diagnosis. Rachel Warren, Elizabeth's best friend, sat next to Clark. "You know," she said quietly, "Elizabeth was always afraid that the truth would ruin her relationship with her daughter. But not even in her worst nightmares could she have imagined such an ending." "The truth has a way of coming out," Clark replied. "Always." When the trial was over, he stepped outside. The spring rain was washing away the last traces of winter from the streets. New life, new beginnings, but for some, the bonds broken by betrayal and anger could never be restored. In her prison cell, Sophia sat on the narrow bunk, reading a letter from Jennifer. The days merged into an endless gray ribbon filled with regret and impotent rage. She often saw her mother's face in her dreams, not distorted by fear and pain, but the calm, loving face she remembered from her childhood. And in those moments, the pain of loss was almost unbearable. Sometimes she wondered what would have happened if she had just left that night. If she had given her mother a chance to explain, perhaps to make amends. But the past couldn't be changed, just as you can't glue a broken vase together or heal broken bonds of trust. The only thing left was to live with the consequences of her actions and hope that someday she could forgive not just her mother and David, but herself.